Have you ever been handed like a massive code base? Maybe something your company just bought, or a project that just landed on your desk.
Oh, yeah. That feeling of staring into this black hole.
Exactly. And you just know it's going to take weeks, maybe longer, just to figure out what's going on.
Right. Painstaking effort.
Well, if that sounds familiar, you're definitely going to want to stick around. Because today, we're diving into something new from OpenAI's ChatGPT. It's called deep research.
And specifically, its ability to analyze entire GitHub repositories.
Yeah. Now, for anyone maybe less familiar, GitHub, that's basically the big online hub where developers keep their code, collaborate.
It's like cloud storage plus a meeting room for software projects and a repository or repo. That's just one specific project space on GitHub.
Gotcha. So what this new ChatGPT feature does, deep research, it connects directly to those repos.
And it does a really deep analysis of, well, pretty much all the code inside. It tries to understand the whole thing.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack what this thing can actually do. What are its limits? And, what impact could it have for anyone who needs to get up to speed on a complex project, like fast?
And we're basing this on some firsthand testing that's been done, so it's a real-world look, not just theory.
Okay, let's get into it. What's the big deal here? Why is this more than just, say, a fancy search tool for code?
Well, the key thing is really the speed and the depth of the analysis. Think about reverse engineering an entire GitHub project, but in minutes.
Minutes, seriously.
That's the claim. I mean, tasks that could easily take you days, maybe even weeks, manually tracing how everything connects, understanding the architecture.
Right. So if you've ever been stuck doing that, wading through code file by file, this sounds like it could be a massive shortcut.
Potentially, yeah. A huge time saver. Cuts down that initial, often really frustrating learning curve.
And it's not just looking at single lines of code then, it's trying to grasp the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's aiming for the whole architecture, how the different pieces, the modules, fit together, how they interact.
Okay.
What's the underlying logic? What are the project's strengths? Maybe its weaknesses. It can even look at things like the user interface. How does that work?
And maybe how to change things, like adding features or fixing bugs.
Precisely. How you might approach modifications, adding, removing, replacing parts. One person who tested this mentioned their own experience, calling it an excruciatingly time-consuming process to figure out code they'd acquired.
I bet. So this tool promises to, well, dramatically shorten that whole phase.
That's the hope, yeah, that painful initial learning bit.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about how it works in practice. We've got a great example of someone testing this on their own project.
Right. The author of an article we looked at decided to point deep research at their own WordPress security plugin. It's called My Private Site.
Okay, My Private Site.
That's
Good name.
Yeah, and it's a great test case. It's freemium, open source, lives on GitHub. It's not trivial either. About 231 files, something like 12,000 lines of PHP code.
Wow, okay.
And it's actively used. Over 20,000 websites run it. So it's a proper, complex, real-world piece of software.
Perfect. So what did they actually do? How did they get ChatGPT to look at this plugin?
So first step, they selected the O3 language model in ChatGPT. They did mention it was a bit confusing, the naming, different from GPT-4o.
Okay, the O3 model. Then what?
Then they used the specific prompt OpenAI shared when they announced the feature. The key part, obviously, was selecting the actual GitHub repo for My Private Site right inside the deep research tool.
Which means giving ChatGPT access to their GitHub account, presumably.
Exactly. You have to grant those permissions, which makes sense.
Sure. Did it just work? Smooth sailing from there.
Not quite immediately. They actually hit an error message first. Something about access? Yeah. ChatGPT flagged potential issues, maybe ownership, how the repo was connected, whether it was public. But the author confirmed they owned it, it was public, and then it worked fine.
Okay, so a small hiccup, but resolvable. It shows it's not always, completely magic. A bit of troubleshooting might be needed.
Right. A little reminder, it's still software.
So after clearing that hurdle, what did it produce? What did this repository review actually contain?
Well, after about 20 minutes or so of processing.
20 minutes for 12,000 lines of code. That's pretty quick.
It is quite fast, yeah. It generated this pretty large document. The author mentioned seeing the scroll bar was tiny, meaning it was long.
Okay.
And it was structured nicely into 5 main parts. First, the project's purpose and its overall architecture, like the main pieces and how they connect.
High-level stuff.
Right. Then, details on the key modules and components, what each part actually does. Third, the tech stack, languages, frameworks, that sort of thing.
Makes sense.
Fourth, any notable open issues or upcoming changes it could find, maybe from the repo's issue tracker. And finally, some suggestions for improving the code quality, potential optimizations.
Suggestions, too. Interesting. So what was the verdict? Did the AI actually, get the plugin?
The author seemed genuinely impressed. They said it completely got my private site,
Wow.
described it as a proper deep dive, giving clear and crucially accurate explanations of how the plugin worked internally.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, the AI apparently identified a fairly complex system inside the plugin for managing user roles and permissions. And it explained the logic behind it in a way the author felt was really spot on.
Something that would normally take a lot of digging to figure out.
Exactly, something you typically have to trace manually through the code. So this initial big review really suggested the tool could handle real-world complexity.
That's already pretty valuable. But I understand the author pushed it further, didn't just stop at the overview.
Correct. They wanted to see if it could handle, the really tricky bits. So they focused on 2 specific subsystems in my private site that are known to be complex.
Okay, stress testing it. What was the first one?
The first was the user interface, the dashboard area. Apparently, it had been rebuilt recently and was acknowledged as being pretty intricate.
And how did deep research do with that?
The assessment was, great job. It provided clear, comprehensive, and useful information that accurately described the UI's structure and how users interact with it.
Okay, good start. What was the second area?
The second was the core functionality, the access blocking part. I mean, it's a security plugin, so that's key.
Right, the main reason it exists.
And this system is also designed to be extensible, so other add-ons can plug into it to add more security features, kind of layered complexity.
So could the AI understand that extensibility aspect?
Apparently, yes. Deep research managed to explain not just the core blocking mechanism, but also how those add-ons could hook in and extend things. The author called it a spot-on analysis again.
That is pretty impressive, especially understanding how different parts integrate.
Yeah, getting those relationships right is often the hardest part manually.
And you mentioned this analysis, the whole session is available online.
Yes, the author shared it. So if you're technically minded and want to see the actual prompts, the full output, you can go explore it yourself.
We'll definitely link to that. Okay, so sounds like a potential game changer. But there's always a but, isn't there? What are the catches? The limitations?
You're right. There are definitely some important things to be aware of. Probably the biggest one right now is the query limits based on your ChatGPT subscription.
The cost.
Well, more the usage limits first. For the standard deep research queries, using that O3 model, you only get 10 per month if you're on the Plus plan.
10, that's it, for $20 a month.
Yep. And the author pointed out they used several of those 10 just doing the testing for their article.
Wow, okay. You could burn through those really quickly trying to understand a whole project.
Easily. 10 queries doesn't feel like much for a deep dive into a significant code base.
So what's the alternative if you need more?
The next step up is the ChatGPT Pro plan. Significantly more expensive, $200 a month.
Ouch. $200.
Yeah. The author even floated the idea of maybe upgrading to Pro for just 1 month if you, say, acquire a new project, do all your intensive analysis, then downgrade back to Plus.
A potential workaround? Maybe, but still, that $200 is a hurdle, especially if you've just spent money acquiring something.
It's a big jump. The author felt that 10 query limit might be too tight for many, and the $200 Pro cost could be a tough reach, especially when budgets are tight after an acquisition.
Makes sense.
They did express hope, though, that OpenAI might tweak the pricing or the limits as the feature matures and they get more feedback.
Something to watch then. Any other big caveats, things to keep in mind?
Yeah, a really crucial one. Remember, this is an analysis tool, primarily, meaning it's designed to help you understand the code, the architecture, the connections, the high-level view. It helps you get oriented before you start coding or while you're trying to figure out where to make a change.
So it's not writing code for you or directly fixing bugs within the repo.
No, not directly modifying the code in that way. It's about comprehension. And also, the standard AI disclaimer applies. It's likely to get some things wrong.
The accuracy issue.
Exactly. It might misunderstand parts, it might hallucinate sometimes, it may not be able to help with everything. So you absolutely cannot just take its output as gospel.
Use it as a guide and assistant, but keep your own critical thinking engaged. Don't switch your brain off.
Precisely. It's a powerful aid, but it's not infallible. It doesn't replace careful code review and your own expertise.
That's a really important point. Okay, so looking forward, beyond analyzing acquired code, what other potential does this unlock?
Well, the author brought up a really interesting idea, using it to understand huge, complex open source projects. Think about something like WordPress itself, or maybe the Linux kernel, or big
Right,
frameworks.
projects that are almost impossible for one person to fully grasp.
Exactly. Could you use deep research to quickly find where specific functionality lives? Or figure out how to work around a known limitation? Or maybe identify the best way to integrate your own code or plug in into that massive ecosystem.
That could seriously lower the barrier to entry for contributing to or building on top of those big important systems.
It really could make them feel less intimidating, perhaps.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What's the main takeaway for our listeners from all this?
I think the key point is that ChatGPT's deep research for GitHub looks like it could be a genuinely transformative tool, especially for anyone who regularly deals with unfamiliar or complex code bases.
That promise of saving significant time and effort in that initial analysis phase.
Exactly. That can be incredibly valuable, freeing you up to focus on the actual building or fixing sooner, getting you past that initial hurdle much faster.
And it's a significant but.
But you absolutely have to be aware of the current limitations. The query caps on the Plus plan, the cost of the Pro plan, these are real factors right now.
And the accuracy.
And the fact that it's an aid to understanding, not a magic wand. It requires your judgment, your critical evaluation. Don't treat it as perfect.
Right. Use it wisely. Okay, so here's something for you, our listener, to think about. Consider your own work, your own projects. How could a tool like this potentially change the way you approach new code? Whether it's inherited, open source, or even just a complex part of your own system you need to revisit.
Yeah, and think about that balance. How much do you lean on this kind of AI assistance versus relying on your own hard-earned knowledge and instincts? Where's the sweet spot?
What's the right mix going to be for you?
Yeah.
Definitely something worth mulling over.